Okay, and we are live, I believe, and there I am on webcam. Hooray! Okay, so hello and welcome. This is my second weekly show, delayed slightly because of DreamHack. Basically, I am not going to try and compete with a tournament that draws 20,000 viewers. So delayed by a couple of days. I'll be doing another one again Saturday, 12 o'clock, usual time. In fact, I should mention the one this Saturday is going to be looking at some Terran versus Protoss timings, and particularly when Terran can push against a Protoss and just the general timings of the most common playstyles in those two matchups. So if you're a Terran player and you're struggling against Protoss, that would be a good one to watch. But today it is the current state of PvP, and this is something that, again, I'm going to present this in a way that is more understanding the thought process behind how you would go and put this into effect in a game, more than what the actual state of the game is. Sort of understanding how the state of the game has ended up where it is, rather than just, well, do this build. So it should be useful to all races. Obviously not as useful as for Protoss, but there we go. Now, I will not be using the term metagame very much, because PvP is not a metagame. PvP is a game. It is a matchup. Metagame refers to things outside the matchup that can have an influence in the matchup, like you 6-pull somebody, not because it's a very strong build, but because you want to unsettle them and throw them off their build and make them panic, basically. And that is an example of a metagame tactic. So feel free to slap me if I do see that. But anyway, what I want to do first of all is just begin talking about sort of the history of the matchup and how it's got to where it is. Now, obviously, previously, PvP was basically 4-gate versus 4-gate, 99% of games decided then, and then Colossus in the late game. Now it is a lot more subtle than that, and it is actually, I think, one of the most technically interesting matchups in the game. Really enjoyable, particularly if you really pull out minute details of what's going on. If you're really observant, well, I mean, as with all matchups, I guess it's the same in TVT, same in TVZ particularly. But the 4-gate change has not killed 4-gate completely. It is still a good opening. It is still a good way to punish a player who's being very greedy. But it has meant that you have to begin thinking about how well, you have to begin thinking about builds that are not 4-gate. And it's still used as sort of the metric of the matchup. I'm going to get my hair out of my way permanently. It's used as the metric of the matchup, so basically a build is generally discarded if it can't ever hold a 4-gate, which is a fairly common metric in all matchups. So I then want to analyze the other aspect of the former matchup, the late game Colossus style. Now, a lot of people criticized PvP, again, because if it does somehow survive past the 4-gating stage, you get these large Colossus battles that are essentially decided by Colossus numbers. And while that to some extent is true, Colossus play is, in general, largely dead. And I'll explain why now. So the two sort of, well, okay, the one, I'm not going to call it a build because there are hundreds of ways that you can get to it, but the one staple strategy that is coming out of this is a Blinkstalker Robo. Again, because you don't have to be so hyper-aggressive with the early game, you can hold off a 4-gate while teching. The tech of choice has ended up being Blinkstalker Robo. And Blinkstalker Robo is actually time and time again demolishing Colossus plays. And if anyone wants to suggest an answer for why, I'll be asking a number of questions. I am monitoring the chat do feel free to throw out answers, but I'm not going to be specifically looking for answers. Then, okay, there are Phoenix builds as well, which are very, very strong, but they're just so hard to execute that I just have never really bothered with them. If you feel that you are particularly fond with Phoenixes and are particularly good with them, absolutely go with them. They're really, really, really viable, but they are so hard to execute. I mean, you can lose the game if you get too greedy and lift up too many probes. So, anyway, getting on to the matchup itself. Now, generally what is always a good point to look at any matchup, generally what is going to be a fairly sort of staple strategy is whoever has the most mobile units using the most mobile units to exploit mobility to annoy the hell out of his opponent and pull a win that way. You see it in basically every matchup. People love to exploit highly, highly mobile units. And in PvP, the most mobile unit is the Blinkstalker. Again, Phoenixes do compete with Blinkstalkers for mobility, but that is very, very difficult to pull off, and I'll show you why. And now, what's wrong with the Colossus is not that they are bad units. They are very, very good units. They're very, very powerful, and when things get to the late game, you generally have to either have Colossus or Archons or both, just because of the sheer brute power of the units needing to overpower maxed army battles. But I have hated the Colossus for a long, long time, basically since the game came out, because, as always, what's more important about a build is how you get to that build than how you actually use it. And while Colossus plays aren't really dead, they are so struggling to deal with Blinkstalker plays. Blinkstalker Robo. Previously, there was no ways you could get Blinkstalker and Robo because your opponent would just come and crush you with... You basically had to hope he didn't go a 4-gate. Even if you held off a 4-gate, he could build a massive army advantage and come in and kill you, and or just expand and defend that. Now, you don't need to invest as much in just early game holding your ramp, so you have more tech options open to you. So I'm a big fan of just going in and observing, so I will go in and observe in a replay in this game pretty much now. Sorry, this is the wrong place. I am just loading up the replay. I should have this anyway. So I've said sort of very vaguely the most mobile units are always going to be effective, and we'll see exactly why now. Okay, so let's go and have a look at this game. So we've got Nani spawning us, the orange Protoss, and he's playing against Strange. Now, I didn't have any particular preference for choosing this game, but well, Nani tends to pull out some really well-refined, really well-thought-out builds, so I basically did that. Now, throughout all of this, again, I did brush on it, I'm just going to make it absolutely clear. Throughout all of this, I am not going to care in the slightest bit about the opener. Not even the slightest bit. The opener is how you try and pull some slight advantage. There are many of them, you can Google them, you can practice the builds, you can find out what's safe. There are a lot of defensive 3-gate builds. There are, you know, there's Oz's 11-gate, 3-gate pressure, where you try and pick off some probes and pull an economic advantage that way. 4-gates is still viable. You know, there are 2-gate robos that are popping up that you can hold with early immortals. And there are a lot of people sort of shying away from Colossi altogether, despite the Colossus still being a very, very strong unit. And so you generally see people securing an expansion either with Immortals and Sentries, or doing these Blinkstalker plays. And sort of both have their advantages, but when it comes down to it, if you control perfectly, the Blinkstalker build is what you should be going for. It's the build that will do the most. It's the build that will be good against any other build, and it's no longer this rock, paper, scissors matchup. If you control Blinkstalkers very, very well with a Robo, you are safe against any other build, and you can pull a win. Which is why I said it's the build that you should really be focusing on if you are struggling in this matchup. So what we're going to see is Nani and Strange are going to open up, and I don't care how they open up. Again, this is something you can just go and Google. I think, I mean, I haven't even looked at it. I think Nani does some sort of 3-gate, defensive 3-gate. Oh no, he feigns a 4-gate or something. But in any case, both players fairly standard up until this point. And double gas from Naniwa. And he's gonna fake a 4-gate and build a pylon just to keep his opponent on his half of the map. Strange, on the other hand, I believe goes 2-gate Robo. He might go 3-gate Robo. Again, I don't really care. What I care about is the general feel of what this mid-game goal they are going for. So yeah, you can see Nani sending some units that were promptly repelled. And, okay, 3-gate Robo. And then, let me just rewind slightly to the 6-minute mark. 2 gates from Naniwa. Again, this is a little bit risky, but he is such a fantastic microer that he can hold this. But what I care about is this point, this overall feel. What's happening now. Choose whatever opening suits your playstyle best. You can go for a 3-stalker rush. You can absolutely keep 4-gating if you absolutely want. But this mid-game feel is what I want, and we can see how this can be screwed around over time. I'll show in the next game what happens when people do kind of aggressive openings and how it still relates back to this very, very general feel. So, now, why is Blinkstalker Robo so good? What about it is so good? And that's just something I want you to think about. I've made this bold claim that it can stand up against anything else that a Protoss can do. And so why then is that the case? Why is it just... why does it integrate well? Why does it do well against other builds? Just think about that for a while, and I will give you the answer shortly. So, as we can see, Naniwa getting a Twilight Council, then getting a Robo. I don't actually care about the orders of these. I really, really don't care about the orders of these. Lots of players prefer to do it different ways. Naniwa feels safe, so he gets the Twilight first for a super early blink, and then gets the Robo for his observers. A lot of players will flip those orders. A lot of players will use the Robo to get a couple of mortals to defend their ramp against a 4-gate, and then get the Twilight Council and go blink. We will see. I've only got 2 replays, but I can find dozens more in a couple of seconds. This general Blinkstalker Robo is the current go-to state of the game. And what we're seeing from Strange is, okay, well, we're not seeing it yet, but he's going to go for Colossus. And I chose this replay for that exact reason, because a lot of people are stuck in the mindset that the Colossus is this big, unstoppable thing. And sure, in large armies, you know, if a Blinkstalker army tries to engage an army with Zealots, 3 Colossus with range, and some sentries sitting there, maybe, or probably not too many sentries, but a couple of Stalkers, or whatever. But if a Blinkstalker army tries to engage a large Colossus ball, they're just going to lose. No amount of micro can overcome that. So definitely, if the game gets late game, push the game towards Colossus. You want to get Colossus at some point, or Archons, or just those big beefy units, standard stuff that you should be doing anyway. But rushing to Colossus, that's very weak against Blinkstalkers. Very, 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 very weak against Blinkstalkers. Because the strength of the Colossus is that it's a tough unit in head-on fights. The weaknesses of the Colossus is that it is highly, highly immobile and extremely vulnerable when alone. It needs to have units preventing enemy units from attacking it. So it only basically gets good once you have range and you have a decent line of units in front of your Colossus, and you can exploit that 9 range. Now, analysing what it takes to get Colossus, well, you need the Robo, you need the Robo Bay, you need range, all of which takes infinity seconds and a stupid amount of gas. So this Twilight tech, which Blink is going to kick in on average around the 9-minute mark, well, you can't possibly have a Colossus Ball that's going to deal with Twilight in time. So you can exploit the mobility of Twilight to pull a huge advantage somehow else. And if we accept the fact that the Protoss player can... the Colossus player, I shouldn't say Protoss player. If we accept the fact that the Colossus player can only push out once he's got this critical mass of Colossi, well, that's a long time off. And he's going to have a hard time investing so much into Colossus tech while getting and defending an expansion against Blink Stalkers. So bear that in mind through the course of the game. And yeah, his Robo his Robo facility goes down now, and immediate robotics pay. And Naniwa chrono boosting the Blink. He just has such incredibly refined play. And so now I will answer my earlier question of why is this Blink Stalker Colossus so good? Well, nothing in the Protoss army, with the exception of the Phoenix, is more mobile than Blink Stalkers. Absolutely nothing is. Blink Stalker's biggest problem is that you really need to have good information, A, on where your enemy's army is, and B, you need sight of the high ground to really exploit them to their fullest potential. If you pre-4-gate nerf tried to invest into Blink Stalker and Robo, you would have such a weak army that a 4-gate could just come and kill you. Now that that's not the case, you can absolutely do this, and so this build is just absolutely taking over. You see it so often. Simply because you have the Observer to keep track of where his army is, so you can attack where his army isn't, and you can see the high ground. And a lot of this matchup actually comes down to Observer sniping, funnily enough. But what we'll see from Nani is that he's just remaining defensive until his Blink is almost done. And notice how he pushes out just slightly before his Blink finishes, so he can begin exploiting Blink as it's done. We'll look at the timing of this. Just, I mean, another example of wonderfully refined play. Yeah, his units are just about getting to his opponent's base, and Blink is just finished. Okay, so we have this Colossus player. Getting the range, getting the Colossus. If we look at the army tab, let's look at the units tab, that'll be better. 9 Stalkers versus 4 Zealots and 2 Stalkers and 1 Sentry. I don't care about this Zealot because he's not going to be able to use it. So Naniwa absolutely has the army advantage. There is no ways that Strange can win in a head-on direct fight, especially not with Blink. So what he has to rely on is basically high ground advantage, and despite the fact that there is not a huge amount of high ground advantage as such, the fact of the matter is that the Blink Stalkers still have to blink up at some point, and then they're immobile for a long period of time until the next blink is off cooldown. So if you can have Zealots where the Blink Stalkers are going to blink up, then you'll do okay. So you will often see Blink Stalker Robo just winning against Colossus builds at this point. This is part of why they are so risky. But Naniwa, bear in mind, still doesn't know what strategy Strange is going for. I mean, okay, he'll have good information. But just coming in, checking that there's no expansion. Good play. A really early expansion would just die to this as well, because, again, you don't have the units to defend multiple locations. And now the first Colossus is out. And now these armies are looking kind of even. You kind of expect them to work out well in a direct confrontation. But, as I said before, this Colossus is so extremely vulnerable if left alone, that he has to basically march his entire army around as a clump and use the fact that the Blink Stalkers don't want to be blinking onto Zealots to deter them from blinking on the Colossus and sniping the Colossus. But what that means is that he can only defend one location. He can only defend a 6 range in a circle around this Colossus, basically. And the Colossus is not going to outrun Stalkers, 2.25 movement speed versus 2.95 movement speed, which means that we can begin proking and prodding in multiple locations, And crucially, there is no way in hell Strange is ever going to be pushing out in any sort of within the next few minutes. So Naniwa does the poke and prod, just doing damage where he can. Very wonderful stuff. I don't believe he took... he did take some minor health damage. And at this point, a lot of people will be sort of saying, well, this just goes to show that Colossus are Imba because Strange is holding off this Blinkstalker play, and he's getting Colossus up, which is the superior tech. Once he gets a critical mass of Colossi, he's just going to crush Nani and win. But note that he can't possibly take an expansion. If he does try to take an expansion, then Naniwa pokes in here, forces his army here, runs around, blinks up here, gets into the main, kills probes, blinks out, or, you know, even just, we'll see later, Naniwa's going to run his army all the way around here and blink out here. Using the fact that Strange can't catch Naniwa. He just can't catch this army. And if he tries to split the army up, well... Oh, bugger, I had that on camera during that. But, yeah, basically, Naniwa, sorry, is going to poke in here, and force the army here, and then sort of blink up here and pick off probes or snipe buildings or snipe pylons and just deal damage, and punish him for trying to take an expansion. If he doesn't take an expansion, then great, we can expand ourselves, and by the time he can push out, at, say, the 12-minute mark, once range is done and he has a decent number of Colossi, we're just going to have a huge army advantage that it won't matter. And, on top of that, we can choose where to engage, so we can engage in a wide open field and use our Blink Micro to turn a further advantage. And through all of this, note that if at any point Strange tries to split his army up to defend multiple locations, Naniwa can blink in and snipe every single Colossus. The sort of effort is on Strange's part in defending against these Blinkstalkers. He really can't afford to miscontrol his Colossus at any point. So, you know, here's what we're talking about. Nani tries to snipe the Colossus. That doesn't work. But hey, he hasn't blinked onto Zealots, so he can just run away. And these Zealots are never going to be able to catch his Stalkers. But now that he's forced the Colossus back, he's just doing some damage, and bam, he's not going to blink out. He's going to, again, use the fact that his Colossus was separated from his army, and just blink up the time. And what is crucially important, what I really want you to take from this, is not what he's doing. It's not his micro. You do not need micro to do this. It is the general theme behind it. It is the thought process behind what he's doing. He is using the most mobile unit in the matchup. He is exploiting its mobility, exploiting the mobility advantage he has over his opponent to pull whatever lead in any way, despite the fact that he can't actually engage his opponent's army head-on. He can't. He will lose that fight. He will absolutely... Well, he could arguably win it now, but before the Colossus went down, he would absolutely lose it. And notice Strange's response. Well, yeah, better get an Immortal. There's no ways he can afford to get a Colossus now, because if he gets a Colossus, then Nani snipes it again, and he's in a very, very dire position. So he needs a unit that can directly deal with these Blinkstalkers. So, yep, there's the Immortal coming. And what this effectively means is that through no particularly great feat, although that Colossus snipe was really, really nice, Naniwa is delaying this dreaded Colossus push, just by being annoying. Nothing really too complex, just by running his army around. It doesn't even matter if he's attacking units or not. Strange is really feeling the pressure, and as we'll see, Naniwa behind this is going to throw down an expansion. So again, just using this Observer, notice the Observer snipe, that is a crucial moment in the matchup. You really should focus on sniping Observers in this matchup at the moment, but in any case, just poking and prodding, and we have an expansion going down. Analyze this from Strange's point of view. What can Strange do? There's no ways in hell he can try to take his own expansion. All he's got is this tech that isn't proving to be too useful because he can't ever catch Naniwa's army. So he's really in a dire position, and this is basically how every Colossus versus Blinkstalker build goes these days, which is why Colossus are an important part of the matchup at the 15-minute mark, not at the 10-minute mark. Colossus builds tend to fail pretty hard at this point, although, you know, there are certainly a lot of Korean players who are using them and pulling them off just with the most absolutely amazingly godlike Colossus Micro, and it can be done, but it is so hard, and that's what I say about the Phoenix builds as well. Phoenix builds are really strong in this matchup right now, but you need to be so good at using them, absolutely so good at using them. Whereas this Blink Stalker thing, yes, good Blink Micro will get you huge advantages, sniping Colossi will get you huge advantages, but what's crucial is the theme behind it. He is really just, he's got a Blink Stalker Contain, which is allowing him to get this expansion up and pull a macro lead and then win the game because of that. And really, I mean, some of you will have known, I spent a long time after the 4-gate nerf trying to work out what to be doing, and I started off wanting to do a Charge Lot Archon build, and I just found that it got demolished by any sort of Colossus play. So then I sort of thought, well, okay, I better get Blink first and just use Blink to contain the Colossus player until my Charge Lot Archon really pays for itself. And so then I was doing that, and I was getting the expansion and getting the Charge Lot Archon. And then I realised that, in fact, I don't need to make the transition to Charge Lot Archon until well after my expansion is done, and ended up with this Blink Stalker style. And certainly, I mean, if you dedicate time to it, absolutely try and find things that you can do. But what you sort of will inevitably find is that Blink Stalkers are pretty good. You will keep coming back to Blink Stalkers, specifically because they are the most mobile unit in this matchup. And so if he doesn't have Blink Stalkers, you can always exploit mobility to turn an advantage in some way. If he doesn't have Blink Stalkers, by definition, you are more mobile than him. With the exception of Phoenixes, but again, like the number of times I've had a Protoss player go Phoenixes against me, and again, this was something I experimented with a lot before the 4-gate died, and you need to be so careful, because if you run your Phoenixes out of energy by going for probes, your opponent will say, ha! Waltz his army over to your base and kill you. And then you're screwed. Another problem with Phoenixes is that you can't do anything about Archons, and you can't stop a player from expanding, because you can't kill buildings. So they do work, they are very strong, they can absolutely beat Blink Stalkers in a number of ways, but you need to be so good with them that, I just don't dare using them, basically, because my mechanics are fairly shocking. But if you do have good mechanics, absolutely go for it. They are fun, they are the most fun builds in the world, but you will have so many frustrating misses. So again, notice Naniwa is just, he's not really trying to kill anything, he's just making his opponent aware that his army is here. He's using that more than any other aspect of the Blink Stalkers. And the moment he catches his opponent out of position, he can go in and punish him for it. The moment his opponent makes the slightest mistake, bam, his probes die. And so, yeah, Strange will get a couple of mortals just so that these Blink Stalkers absolutely can't engage his army before resuming Colossus play. And this Colossus push has now been delayed past the 11-minute mark. Nani is about to be mining from this very late expansion of his. And Strange doesn't even have an expansion up. So, Nani will begin resuming probe production, although he did produce quite a few probes throughout this, and will pull ahead economically, all the while having ensured that the Protoss player can't be going Colossus. And again, another thing to think about is, well, what if the Colossus player does just decide to go for it? He just stays in his base, builds up 3 Colossus with range immediately, and just pushes out with that. Well, then just blink your Stalkers into his main. The moment his army leaves the base, blink in, kill every single one of his probes, and if he pulls back, great, you've got a free amount of economic damage. If he doesn't pull back, your Blink Stalkers can still get back to your base in time, and okay, you can go for a base race, which you will by definition win because you have the most mobile army, but you can kill his economy and still have your army back in time to defend, in an exact analogy with why Methyscs and Banelings work so well against Terran. And it really is that style of matchup. There was something very crucial that I wanted to talk about right at the beginning of this show that I've completely forgotten about. And I am kicking myself because I wrote it down somewhere and now can't find where I've written it down. But anyway, powering on. If it comes to me, I will remember. And so... I mean, again, just more of the same. It's absolutely going to be more of the same. We're going to pull through it, and now, I mean, at this point, finally, Strange has an army that he can begin chasing these Blinkstalkers away. He can absolutely force them out of the areas without really... Again, note that if Nani had just tried to immediately blink round them, he probably would have taken a lot of damage. So he can now get his expansion up, and he can probably defend it. But Nani is just going to keep poking and prodding. He's lost his observer, which is the biggest issue for him right now, but, well, hopefully he'll be getting that back up, because it is so crucial. But notice how far ahead his expansion was, and he's just pulling massively ahead in terms of supply now. So, bam, 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 and now Nani just can't engage this army directly on by any stretch of the imagination. He's just going to lose this fight so horribly. But again, if Strange tries to push up, Nani can blink into his base, take out every single probe, and get back in time to defend. Power up gateways and just overcome his army with sheer numbers, basically, which is exactly what we'll see him do. So I'm largely going to fast forward to this one crucial point, which I believe is coming round about now. Okay, this was wonderful play from Naniwa. He's got the Blinkstalkers here, really just using them as bait, and he's going to try and snipe this Nexus here. Again, just the sort of stuff that you can do to exploit Blinkstalkers' mobility. So there we go, bait successfully achieved. Let's see if we can snipe the Nexus. And bam, Nexus sniped. Now, what really could Strange have done about that? Not a huge amount. He has to respond to this Blinkstalker threat, and he doesn't... Well, he didn't know about these units, but even if he did, he can't afford to split up his army, because then he loses Colossi. So, again, it is the idea behind this, the stylistic type of play, rather than what you actually do, that is so crucial. And that is what's governing this matchup at the moment. And Naniwa did lose quite a few units at that. If we look at the army tab, well, he's actually ahead on show count, but I mean, his army is definitely inferior. Definitely inferior. And particularly when this happens. Again, you know, Protoss's Colossi are here. Great, let's blink up into the main. His entire army has to walk around with the ramp. If he tries to separate his Colossi from the rest of his units, I'll snipe free Colossi and get the win there. So I really do think he could have turned back and killed the Colossi at this point, but instead he goes for this. And this is really sort of a worst case scenario for Nani. Oh no, okay, he did pull his Colossi back. Again, just completely sensible play from Strange. But notice how I said that even if his escape path gets cut out, this army still can't chase down his Blinkstalkers. It just can't. Okay, with some clever sentry play and clever force fielding, it possibly could. But Nani's just gonna keep running. Absolutely gonna keep running. And here's the probes here. Loved this move. Forcing the blink over. And Naniwa loses a lot of Blinkstalkers really for free. Sniping that one Colossus. Wonderful to see, but I don't think it's at all hard to argue that Naniwa lost out there, particularly with this micro here. So you would think this would be a game-ending mistake. But the sheer fact of the matter is that now was the first opportunity that Strange has had to push. Means that Naniwa has had this economy advantage for so long that he's just, I mean, he's up on 5 gates and he can absolutely support production from a robotics facility and 5 gateways. And I really do like this Immortal transition, because an Immortal is a unit that can directly encounter the Colossus head-on. It can afford to go in a straight-up fight with the Colossus, and it'll come out okay. So, as long as you don't really let Zealots cut you off with the Colossi. But we're going to see this battle that, if we look at the army tabs, fairly even, but it's not going to work out well for Strange. just because of the sheer amount of production. I mean, he will start off, look at this, he's starting off definitely pulling a lead, but just the sheer production that Naniwa has means that he can pull a win. And now Naniwa's catching up, he was even ahead there, and now he's pulling ahead, and now he's just winning, and now Stranger's dead. Clean up from there. And now Strange will throw in the towel. Okay. So, what I want you to think about is not sort of what do I do in this matchup, because that's not so crucial as how you identify that this Blinkstalker Robo thing is. I don't want you to just go Blinkstalker Robo, because it may not work out for you. You know, I can go on till I'm blue in the face that Blinkstalker Robo is the best composition in this matchup, and I honestly believe it is. And I think you'll be hard pressed to find PvPers who would disagree. But what's important is the idea behind it. You are basically saying that I am going to have the most mobile army, and I'm going to use that mobility to kill you. And it really is getting to the point where if you don't have Blink at some point in the game, if you don't have Blink during these big mid-game battles, you're basically going to lose. Because if you don't have Blink, there is not a single thing that is forcing a player who does have Blink to engage you. Not a single thing. Even if you push into his natural, he can choose to go for a base race. And Blinkstalkers generally win base races. There's that old anecdote of don't base race a Methysc build, which works for Blinkstalkers as well. Don't base race a Blinkstalker build, because they can get around the map so incredibly quickly. And again, I don't care how you get there. Google search. Sort of, I can go through openings on a show if you want, but the openings don't matter. The openings will very rarely end the game. All you're looking for is to pull slight advantages. You're going to say, right, I think if I do this, I'm going to get slightly ahead, which means this big mid-game encounter is what's going to decide the game. And mid-game in PvP's sense is basically when this Blinkstalker shenanigans starts to happen, extending up until the point where a strong one-base Colossus play will come out. And I don't have time to go through how this Blinkstalker Twilight play works against every single composition. But I don't need to, because I cannot emphasize enough the thought process behind it. You are using the most highly mobile units in the matchup to basically just pull a win. And if he goes a mirror build, well then, you know, you will... sorry, if he goes a mirror build, then it just comes down to micro and control, which is fairly standard and to be expected. If he tries to go for a Blink all-in without Robo, then you can sit on your ramp and use the ramp advantage to kill him. Just outright kill him. So, really, Blinkstalker Robo is the first build, the sort of most straightforward, easily obtained build that makes sense against anything. Because it does okay against Phoenix plays. Again, that is just a highly sort of skill-dependent build. But they're fairly well matched up. They do play out well. And if at any point the Phoenix player gets too greedy in killing probes, you can just go and kill him. It can hold a 4-gate. It does very, very well against any sort of Colossus play. And against Chargelot Archon, well, you still have the mobility advantage. Because, sure, the Zealots will charge forward and bash your Stalkers once. But after that, you can blink forward, and again, there's nothing forcing him to engage. And what's even worse is if he does try to engage, what'll happen is his Zealots will get so far ahead of his Archons that you can just pull back and pull back and pull back and kill his Zealots, all the while firing out and killing Archons. So, again, I'm not going to go into details about how you deal with each specific matchup, as long as you understand the concept that you're trying to exploit this mobility. So I'm going to hop out of that replay and, oopsie, not do that. I'm going to get into the next replay. So, again, feel free to yeah, okay. Cole Apple has just brought up a very, very, very important point. What about warp prisms? And again, yes, warp prisms can absolutely make a big difference. Whiterot has been doing a lot of 4-gate warp prisming plays, where essentially it just delays the warp gate enough to get a warp prism out and has a 4-gate coming in at the back of your main, where you can't use any ramp advantage to defend it. And warp prisms in general, yes, they are very, very, very effective. But they're still not as mobile as Blinkstalker plays. They're just not. Okay, you can get warp prism speed upgrade, which makes them as well more mobile than Blinkstalker plays. And that is something you see a lot. It's a very, very, very stylistically Korean thing of 2 immortals in a warp prism with speed. And again, that's a viable build. That's an absolutely, absolutely viable build. And it fares pretty well against Blinkstalkers. But it is very, 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 very hard to execute. You absolutely have to know exactly what you're doing at all times. And if you slip up once, you're dead. Whereas Blinkstalker plays are good against everything, and you don't actually need to be that good. You see a lot of Immortal Sentry plays trying to secure an expansion that way. But what I do, again, as the Blinkstalker player, you realise the fact that he's going for an expansion. Great, I can expand at the same time. Even if his army is stronger in a direct fight, the moment he pushes out, I blink into his main, kill his robo facility, kill some probes, and still get back in time to defend. It's exactly the same sort of thing, which is why I don't care about specific compositions. I don't care how you get there. What I care about is the fact that you're analysing that you're using mobility to be good in all situations. And this is something that you can absolutely do. So I'm going to hop into the wrong second game. I apologise. The replay will load up and I'll have to exit and then load up a new replay, so you'll get about 30 seconds of me looking like a dickhead. And it's done. Okay, so right replay loaded up now. Now again, this is going to basically go into Blinkstalker versus Blinkstalker, well, Blinkstalker Robo versus Blinkstalker Robo, but it's going to get there in a very, 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 very weird way, and we'll see. Again, exactly why I don't care in the slightest about the early game. Do whatever early game move that you feel most comfortable with. If you want a 4-gate warp prism, absolutely do it. And I mean, it can work. It's what's your best stats and what you think is good based on what you've read of your opponent. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with absolutely 4-gating every single game. It's still viable. It's just harder to pull off these days. So, what we're going to see is, well, I don't want to spoil too much, but both players start by not going Blinkstalker Robo, and both players end up transitioning into Blinkstalker Robo once their early game plan has sort of played out. So, we've got Mana versus Saplo. Saplo, for those of you who don't know, was a fairly unknown player who went to DreamHack and astounded the hell out of everybody. I believe this particular replay was from an IEM tournament, but he did really well at this most recent DreamHack, and took out Huck even, which taking out Huck in PvP these days is quite a feat, because it's gone from being his worst matchup to being one of his best. So, we see Chronoboost coming down on the warp gate. You might have noticed he got the second gas and is now not mining from it, just from a feint. So yes, we are going to see a 4-gate warp prism play. Hooray! Whiterot does this a lot, and it's really worthwhile. And this, I hope, will address what to do against warp prisms. And warp prism drops are good throughout the game, but you got to realize that Blinkstalker plays do shut them down in exactly the same way that Blinkstalker play will shut down medevac drops from Terran. And so Mana doing the 3-gate robo with this little wall-in that I just absolutely hate because it's a liability against anything that's not a 4-gate. But hey, that's personal choice. And we see the Warp Prism getting chrono boosted out and Warp Gate timing finishing quite conveniently. And so this is exactly why I would say for an opener, don't go for any opener that doesn't get 3 gates out, because you will just die to any sort of Warp Prism play if you don't. You need those 3 gates. So I'm just going to accelerate a little bit further forward, and Saplo is going to do a very, very, very classic technique of feint at the front with some units you don't really care about, and actually 4-gate him in his main. And so we're going to see a lot of damage going out. And I mean, note that the probe counts, well, Mana was ahead as you'd expect, since all 4-gate builds cut at 20, and this is going to even out. So a fairly successful play, not overly successful, but I mean, we're coming out with, well, that Zealot's about to die, so it's going to be 2 Stalkers and 2 Zealots versus 4 Stalkers and 1 Sentry. So fairly even on supplies. Saplo is a little bit behind, but then he has more minerals, so don't really care about that so much. But what's crucial to identify is that the early game has now ended. This was an early game move from Saplo that he was saying, well, I hope Mana gets too greedy and I kill him outright, but either way I'm going to deal some damage to his probes, and hopefully the game will normalise after that. And again, that's all the early game comes down to generally, is you can certainly hope for a free win, but they're few and far between these days. You're just looking to get an edge in any way you can. And so now that it's evened out, well, great, we've already got the robo, throwing down the Twilight, because that's this mid-game sense that we want. And we'll see exactly the same thing coming up from Mana in a second. Saplo's just going to be slightly ahead on his Twilight Council timing. But again, doesn't matter in what order you do it, doesn't matter how you get there, I don't care how you get there, because you can Google search builds that will take you there. What I care about is the general overall feel of how this works, how this plays out, and how you use it. Because, I mean, PvP has gone on from being a solely early game dominated type of game to being sort of really mid-game focused. And when it does get to the late game, yes, you're going to need Colossi or Archons, preferably both. And that's just a natural fact of the game. You get to late game, you want the bulkiest, beefiest, strongest units you possibly can in any matchup. One thing I would like to point out is just something to think about. You can actually get your third in this matchup a lot sooner than most people think. People are delaying their thirds way more than they need to, just out of pure fear. But you can really get your third up quite early. So Mana's going to be using this Observer to just try and pick off what he can. I believe he knows about... No, he doesn't know about this Twilight Council yet, but he will know about it now. And so bam, he knows that Saplo's ahead of him on Twilight Council play. So he's going to have to pull back at some point, lest Blinkstalkers chase down his entire Stalker army. So he pulls back. And again, I mean, this Warp Prism play, yes, absolutely integrate into it. You can absolutely do this, even with this Blinkstalker Twilight play. No reason not to. But it's not really a strategy so much as it is something that you can do to pull a slight lead. It's not the goal that's going to win you the game. It's not your overriding plan for the game that's going to win you the game. It's just something that you can do that forces a micro battle of you versus him, where hopefully you can pull a lead. And that's why this game really does reduce down to basically this build. Because if your opponent has Blinkstalkers and you don't have Blinkstalkers, he can run your army around in circles all day, and there's very little you can do about it. Again, unless you have phoenixes. And with very careful positioning, Colossi and Immortal plays do work out, but still you have to work your ass off to make them effective against Blinkstalker plays. And generally these days, pretty much every single game, at least one player will go for Blinkstalker Robo. It is that sort of staple a build, which is why I'm basically devoting this whole show to it. Just don't think that this is the only thing in the matchup, but it's the thing that makes most sense in the matchup. It's the easiest, really effective overriding plan for the matchup. And so, you know, Mana, Twilight Robo. Notice now this is the 10-minute mark. And again, I don't care that this is the 10-minute mark. Stuff happened in the early game. Great. Doesn't matter. Both players are trying to get to this overall feel of Blinkstalker Robo and just exploiting mobility. And the fact of the matter is that neither player is particularly going to be able to exploit mobility because they're both going to be going Blinkstalker. But now it comes down to a fairly standard micro battle, which you just have to be good at microing to win, essentially. And notice how neither player is going for an expansion. This tends to happen. Generally, if you go Blinkstalker Robo and your opponent doesn't, you can get your expansion up really early and feel really safe because he can't really push out against you. In exactly the same way, I mean, I presume if you're watching this episode and you're Protoss, you're quite familiar with PvZ. And think about the third of that. Think about how a Protoss feels taking his third. He's sort of like, don't know if can. Whereas the Zerg is just like, throw down my third at the 5-minute mark, and I don't care. And it's again because, well, there are some timings where the Protoss pulls a mobility advantage. Early Blinkstalker timings tend to do that. But in general, Speedlings and Roaches just tend to get map control so quickly, and you can't really take a third because Speedlings will run into your third and begin bashing away at the Nexus while Roaches are pushing in at your second, and you can't really deal with that. And it's a similar sort of thing here. So you have the mobility advantage. This allows you to get the economic advantage, which allows you to win the game. Rough overview of your plan. Now this could potentially have been the most brilliant snipe ever. I really think Saplo should have just gone for this, because he knows Blink isn't done researching because he can see the Twilight Council is still researching, so he knows he can run away. You know, still, what he did was not a bad choice by any means. Guaranteed damage, and he gets out alright. And you'll notice temporarily Saplo has the mobility advantage, and he knows he has the mobility advantage, so he's just exploiting it. Now it's going to even up, and the moment he sees Mana blink, well, he's just going to back off. And now he's taking an expansion. This is a fairly common thing, certainly for Blinkstalker versus Blinkstalker. Saplo's just sort of not really quite going to have enough to defend his expansion. You know, again, Mana being annoying with these Warp Prism drops, but he's not committing. Warp Prisms are barely a part of his overall plan. He's not committing to them in any sense. They're not a part of the strategy. They are something he is doing to pull slight leads where he can. But it integrates well with his overall strategy, certainly, because he has the Robo. And then this was really a wonderful play from Mana. Running in with Immortals, forcing the Blinkstalkers away, force fielding the ramp. So certainly, well, for the next few seconds, these Blinkstalkers aren't going to be able to do anything. But more importantly, why this is good is if Saplo wants to engage, he has to blink over the force field, which means that he then won't have blink for 15 seconds during the battle, while Mana will, and he'll put an advantage that way. Slight little things that can help you pull a lead, but that's not really what I'm interested in. And he's just going to kill off this expansion, which really was a bit premature. It's really quite difficult to get an expansion up when going Blink versus Blink, because you have to have such a wide arc. So yeah, and again, you should be seeing a very, very common theme with this play, using observers to get sight of the high ground and exploiting Blinkstalker's mobility. More importantly, using observers to know where your opponent's army is, and using Blinkstalkers to harass wherever's vulnerable. And just something I do want to note, because it's something that can turn a lot of free wins, a very, very great move that Huck does all the time is, first of all, sniping all observers. He really focuses on sniping observers, and it is really crucial in this matchup at the moment. He'll then blink into the opponent's base and snipe the robotics facility while getting Dark Templars. And a lot of people underestimate mid to late game Dark Templars as just a kill strategy. And if you can snipe the robot facility, it's going to just work out hugely. It's just something that's worth bearing in minding. Makes very little sense. Okay, so I like what Saplo's doing here. He's blinking where his opponent is not. Again, exactly how I discussed, this force field forces him to blink over the force field. So he's blinking over the force field where Mana's army isn't, so that he can wait until blink is ready before engaging. And that's exactly what he does, except that he sort of mismicros and has to run away. And I mean, really, at this point, he's just dead. Mana is just so far ahead, the game is over, and Saplo's just going to go for it and get demolished. So, that is basically my analysis of the current state of PvP, and I fully realise, I fully understand I've only really gone through one build, but that's basically because there is only one build that's particularly good at the moment. Again, you can do all sorts of cheesy plays. Dark Templar rushes are bound to work, 4 gates are bound to work, going all in with Immortals and Zealots are bound to work, but, you know, not if your opponent's proficient with force fielding. But Blinkstalker Robo is the earliest mid-game timing that is strong against everything and isn't very difficult to execute. And then from the late game, well, late game is just something that you have to experience. There are too many permutations for the late game eventualities for you to really have a look at analysing them. But the same thing applies to all matchups. You want to get the biggest, bulkiest units out as soon as possible with upgrades, and then sort of demolish them. And Charge Lot Archon and Colossus plays, combinations of both work out well. Storm not so much, because Protoss units tend to be quite beefy and don't tend to be too concerned with storms. Now, there is something that I want to highlight. A common sort of misconception in this matchup is what to do with the upgrades and when to upgrade. And it really is a difficult one to do. Late game, you definitely want to be getting upgrades. Generally, double forge builds will just get stomped, especially if your opponent scouts it. He'll just go in and kill you. So stick to single forge. And just sort of the superlatives. 1 armor is better than 1 damage for most compositions. If you're going Colossus heavy, you definitely want to get one damage, but Colossus builds really are dying out in terms of Colossus rushing. So, particularly for Blinkstalkers, 1 armor is better than 1 damage, but being 2 damage up on your opponent's armor is much better than 2 armor. Like, that much. Like, off the screen, much better. Just of the way the number of hits, if you go and compute the number of hits that it takes for Stalkers to kill things and for Zealots to kill things, you'll see that manifest itself quite naturally. So if you can get 2 attack upgrades ahead, you should be able to just slaughter him with pretty much any composition. Otherwise, being 1 armor up is much better, but it's worth noting that being 2-1 in terms of attack is around as good as being even on attack. Sorry, if you have 2 attack and he has 1 armor and 1 attack, it's sort of roughly as good as if he has 1 armor and you have sort of... I phrased this badly, but being 1 up on attack, not at the 1-0-0 point, is kind of okay-ish because of the fact that shields exist. And the fact that armor only applies to the latter half of the shield. So in other words, if is 1-1 and you are 2-0, it's kind of okay, despite the fact that he's still 1 armor up on you. It kind of evens out. And certainly if you're 2-1 against 1-1, it's better to be the 2-1 with attack than the 2-1 with armor. Well, it's not better, but it's not as bad as the difference between 1 armor and 0 attack is what I'm saying. Which gets a little bit confusing and complicated, but that is the general trend. So we are starting to see Protoss players go armor first, particularly with Blink Stalkers. I'll end it there. Feel free to send in more questions, methysc@gmail.com. If you're confused about anything in this matchup, and again, feel free to ask me any questions in the chat, I will respond to them. If you feel I haven't gone over this sort of analysis enough, if you'd like more, I'm happy to do it. If you want early game builds, I'm happy to do that. Just send me the request. If you want late game, I'm happy to have a crack at that as well, but that's less likely to be useful as just this mid-game analysis. And I really would recommend practicing this Blink Stalker Twilight build if you're at all confused about the matchup, because I can guarantee you it's going to be 90% of PvP fairly soon if it isn't already, and I do believe that it is something pretty. I would totally do something pervy on the stream, but I would like people to actually enjoy videos. You know, I'm not gonna sort of flash my nipples because, while it would be fun and all, I would rather people weren't blinded by my videos and therefore like my videos, and therefore I can keep making them without feeling like a complete toss. Yes, so Ireel, is it? I-R-R-E-L-E? I guess Ireel makes sense. Sorry if I've mispronounced that. But says, I 4-gate every PvP and I would never do that because, oh, irrelevance. Ah, that makes sense. So, irrel, then, I guess, yeah. Because it feels so unsafe. Absolutely. Particularly in the lower leagues, I would still recommend just 4-gating every single game. The reason that the matchup has moved on as it has is because people have gotten proficient in holding 4-gates with builds that aren't 4-gates. All of this is sort of contingent on you holding a 4-gate. And if you can't hold a 4-gate, don't bother with this. Just go 4-gate yourself. But at least have an understanding that in the mid-game, if the 4-gate doesn't end the game, which does happen, then the mid-game feel that you want to be going for is Blink Stalker Robo. And it sort of, by the time you get into Platinum, Diamond, Masters, you should be getting to the point where you can hold a 4-gate with a 3-gate build. And there are plenty of tutorial videos on that. There are plenty of ways of holding it. Yeah, Coleapple says, if I see my enemy 4-gating, I go 3-gate Robo and hold the 4-gate with force fields. Absolutely. 4-gate has been delayed to the point where force fields are a way of holding it now, so you can tech and still hold a 4-gate, which is all that I'm manifesting here. So that's why I said I don't want to focus on the early game. I don't care how you get there. I don't care if you get there at the 11-minute mark or at the 6-minute mark, as long as you have some understanding that once the early game is over, if the game hasn't ended, this is how the matchup feels. And I did that specifically in that fashion because really there are so many videos, there's so many guides. You can just Google search, how do I hold a 4-gate with whatever. There are plenty of 3-gate defensive builds. There are plenty of tutorials that will show you how to do it. If you don't feel confident in doing that, because it is a very, very micro-dependent way of holding the 4-gate, just 4-gate yourself every game. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But you can still gain useful things from this. This has been almost exactly an hour. I'm quite proud of myself. I tend to ramble on. I still can't remember what it was that I wanted to say that was crucially important at the start of this day, this weekly, I should say. So I apologize for that. It was crucially important, and I feel kind of empty at this point. I feel like I've left something out that is going to make this entire thing make sense. If I remember it, I will add it as a comment in the video. Yeah, it wasn't crucial to how the matchup felt, but it was some it was something about just the thought process involved. I was going to link it into the other races and how they can still gain useful information from this, which I guess I kind of did a little bit, but not very well. I had a more succinct way of going it. I will end this show just because I want to produce shows that are an hour long in a fairly regular fashion, just to get some sort of rigidity. I felt that generally my streams before and the VODs that I did before were kind of okay, but without any sort of regular pattern to them, I was getting random people watching at random times, which doesn't work out. So I'm going to end it here, but I will restart the stream. I absolutely will restart the stream, and oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Oh, that's a new background, blatantly. Oh dear. As for support, the absolutely only thing I want at this point is people to watch videos. Like, I would never, ever, 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 ever even picture in the slightest doing this for money. I enjoy doing this. I'm doing this because I want to do it, and I'm doing this regardless of the fact that I don't get more than about 20 people watching. So this is fun for me. So really, the only way that you can support me is by watching, really, and also sending requests to the email address methysc@gmail.com, and I'll just keep making up these shows. I'm going to do them regularly, 12 o'clock on a Saturday, and we can see about extending them later. But at the moment, I just have a lot of work for university. I'm busy applying for PhDs at the moment, so I have zero free time to play this game. So I'm forcing myself to do the show every week because I need to stay involved with the game. I haven't done a Protoss versus Muta, but that's a very interesting one. That is definitely one that I should look at. But absolutely, just keep sending requests to methysc@gmail.com. I'm going to do one this Saturday at 12 PM GMT, so that's 1 o'clock in Europe, 1 PM in Europe, not 1 AM in Europe. Which one is 12 PM noon, or is 12 AM noon? No, 12 AM's midnight, so 12 PM is noon. Good, good, good. And I'm going to do it on basically Terran timings against Protoss. I realise that that's kind of vague, but it specifically it was a specific request that came in from someone who is having a lot of trouble working out when he should be pushing against Protoss and when he should be passive. So I'm basically gonna do a show on that, and then I'll have done a Zerg, a Protoss, and a Terran, and free pick for the one after that. If I do get a huge number of requests, I'll look at doing another show on Tuesday. So I'll do one on Saturday and one on Tuesday, but we'll see how that goes. For the meantime, I'm just going to end the VOD here, and I'm going to take it down, and I'm going to save the VOD, and then I'm going to start the stream back up just for random chatting to you guys, doing whatever I want. And oh, I don't actually have a Facebook, not for my sort of StarCraft 2 stuff, but you can just sort of add me on Facebook if you want. I comment in the Mixed Fruit channel all the time. My name's Robert Turner, if you didn't know that. And yeah, okay, so I'm just going to upload the VOD now, and the stream will be back up momentarily.